Hi everybody, Interceptor here. Get your nostalgia goggles on because today we're going to be looking at religion in Final Fantasy VII. Now, every time you bring up this game, I feel like there needs to be a disclaimer on where you fall. And I have kind of a distance from Final Fantasy VII. I would not say that I have any particularly strong attachment to it. I did not play this game when it first came out because I did not buy a PlayStation 1. In fact, I've never owned a PlayStation 1. So I wasn't able to play Final Fantasy VII until I got my PlayStation 2. And by the time I actually played Final Fantasy VII, I was in graduate school. So I was in, my mid-20s, and that would have been, about 10 years ago. So around 2008 is when I finally played Final Fantasy VII, a whole 10 years, give or take, after its release. So that was enough time for spoilers to be known and for there to be no hype whatsoever, no expectations. It is not my favorite Final Fantasy VII, but I have to say, it is not my favorite Final Fantasy, but I have to say, actually, going back and working on this religion series, the way that my foot is angled, it's moving my computer camera. Alright. But now that I'm working on this religion in Final Fantasy series, I do kind of have a newfound appreciation for it. I think it works much better as a narrative than a game, per se. At least for me, for my playing experience. And let's look into that religion structure that's coming about in Final Fantasy VII and look into it. Now, Final Fantasy VII came out 3 years after Final Fantasy VI. Obviously, a huge departure graphically. Final Fantasy VII is the beginning of the PlayStation era, which is a huge shift. And with the invention of the discs, there is just a whole brand new gate open to developers in terms of depth of the game and playstyle mechanics as well. Obviously, we're not really interested in mechanics here. We're interested in the content and the depth. And last time we did see Final Fantasy VI making some strides in terms of creator gods actually being present, even though they're not omnipotent and omniscient. We have an actual cult of Kefka, so a lot of things were being developed in 7 that get continued, or in 6, sorry, that get continued in Final Fantasy VII. So Final Fantasy VII, the world is very developed, as we know. ShinRa, the company, has taken over this area of the world, planted these Mako reactors everywhere, and really kind of destroyed a previous civilization to build its own industrial world. And that puts us in an interesting development of the world culturally. But let's just try and start with the overview. And I have to say, I'm not an expert on Final Fantasy VII at all. I have only ever played the game once, and I have watched Advent Children a couple times, and I've read a fair number of Wikipedias, especially about Reeve Tuesti, my favorite character. I admit it. I admit it right up front. Reeve, my boy. He is fascinating. He is just really interesting. So when it comes to actually understanding Genova, and Genesis and soldiers and the Cetra. I'm a pretty lost puppy because there's only so much of that was introduced in the original game, and even if it was introduced, it maybe didn't make any sense. And, you know, I just haven't played any of the other stuff. So, I apologize in advance for the Final Fantasy VII experts out there. I'm just going to try and do my best from what I've read. And what I've read indicates there are no gods. But there is this live stream. And the live stream, from what I can tell, is kind of the supernatural force that has power in the world. From what I understand, from what's shown, the live stream is definitely the force of souls that powers the world. Okay, that I'm pretty confident about. The ShinRa is abusing this power and doing the Make a Reactor and draining the earth of the resources and blah 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 blah. That's all bad. And so that's why they have to stop, because they're gonna run out of the live stream, which is kind of important. All the deceased go to the live stream, which I think is the Promised Land, which is the place of unity of the soul with God. I think. That makes sense-ish. And I read somewhere that the sinful dead do not go there. So that does imply that there are rules of morality that determine who gets to pass into the live stream and the Promised Land and have union with God, and who does not. Now, in terms of that understanding, that's pretty Christian. That makes sense to me. Kind of. You know, obviously I don't think there's a live stream powering the world, but I do believe in a communion of saints, so that's something. And, you know, when you die, you either go to heaven or hell, or, well, purgatory first. You probably don't go right to heaven because none of us are perfect. But, you know, so that version of events in Final Fantasy VII has a coherent religious sense about it. Now, the problem is that the world in-game doesn't seem to have any indication of, again, who goes to the live stream and who are sinful people who don't get to go to the Promised Land. I mean, I assume Sephiroth. But I'm just guessing. He seems like a jerk. He goes crazy. It's not good. He tries to destroy the world with a meteor. I'm pretty sure that's bad. Right? I would say most of the ShinRa executives. Right? I don't know. I don't know, because the game doesn't tell you. But there is a developed afterlife that's really central to the plot. And in fact, without the afterlife and Aerith's prayer, you would lose, right? And as a player, I did not like that. I did not like that at the end of the game, the MacGuffin won. The Deus Ex Machina won. Not me at the end of the game. I was very confused and annoyed by that. As a commentator, looking at the role of religion in Final Fantasy and trying to understand in-game religions. That's cool, right? I mean, there is nothing wrong with that on a narrative level. Except for the fact there's actually no religious ritual as far as we can find. There is this weird goddess Minerva who kind of looks like Mary. Okay, that makes sense. People are obsessed with the look of the Virgin Mary, and she is great. People are obsessed with the goddess Minerva because she's the virgin goddess of wisdom, and let's name everything after Minerva, even though we don't need to. Okay, well, fine, whatever. There's a chapel that is a really important plot space, right? That's where Aerith spends most of her time, in the chapel. Presumably, there used to be a religion that met at the chapel. It was probably just something that when ShinRa took over and destroyed, you know, essentially the lower districts and the original cities that made them up, it was something that just got lost. Once ShinRa took over, the old religious structures were abandoned in favor of trying to get with the ShinRa program. And that makes sense. Like, I live in America right now. It's in this weird kind of post-Christian stage where people think we don't need religion to be a good society, which is, like, hugely problematic. But, so a similar thing could be what's happening in Final Fantasy VII. You know, ShinRa, with all of its huge technological advancement, has kind of sent the message to the slums that we're beyond that now. We're beyond the way that you used to live and the things that you used to believe. And people are buying into that. So that's kind of what I imagine is happening with this chapel. So there used to be a religion that met there. There used to be religious rituals and all these kinds of things. And they've just been abandoned. And I think we can kind of see that with the other cultures we encounter in Final Fantasy VII as well. You know, Red 13's people, Yuffie's people, they seem to have their own religions as well. Again, we don't get much insight into the technicalities of it, but it seems to be that they still have it, and so presumably the cities that used to exist in Midgar also had religions that they practiced, and that's being destroyed. And of course, if ShinRa had its way, Wutai and the... I can't remember what Red 13's land is called. But if ShinRa had its way, their cultures would also be destroyed. Everything would go into the technology, and the religions would be abandoned completely, which would be bad. So we're seeing more emphasis on religion, and that's going to actually really continue. But right now, we are still in a very positive religion structure. There aren't any rituals that we know about happening now, but the prayers of Aerith and the life stream and the chapel that is the only place, well, one of the only places where flowers can bloom, show that the soul of a human, that the care for the environment, that the care for humanity and for gods and for proper order are all good things. And ain't goes a different path. 9 kind of continues this discussion, and it's not until 10 when we start seeing a negative reaction to all this. So 10 through 13. Well, really just, 10 through 13. 10, 12, and 13. We see a negative side to it. But we're starting off on a positive note here, even though we don't get too much. But it's all very cool what we do get. So I can see why Final Fantasy VII is kind of popular in terms of its world and some of the characters. Reeve's my favorite. And definitely I know a lot of people who probably are watching this video think that Final Fantasy VII is the best. So feel free to tell me more about why it's super great. I'm excited because next week is Final Fantasy VIII, which is my divisive favorite. So, saying that 6 is my favorite is not controversial. Saying that 10 is my second favorite, also pretty okay. Saying that 8 is my third favorite, hugely controversial. So we'll see next time what it has to say about religion, which is not very much. It's not my favorite because of its religious structures. Oh well. But thanks for watching this one, and everybody take care. Interceptor out.